I will be presenting briefly my own understanding of the critiques related to human rights, and then I will explain a little bit the foundation of right in the workplace, and maybe open floor for a nice conversation. But as a matter of clarification, let me introduce myself in a way that I will be highly subjective. So my talk this morning is related to my understanding of the legal phenomenon, my own personal scholar understanding of the idea of law on the one hand and the idea of right. So it's highly subjective, right? It's a clear subjective choice, but based on a constant and dynamic critiques about law and right. And my point here is to provide you with a clear-cut critical analysis of human rights on the one hand, but in search for equity and dignity in the workplace. Because sometimes what we don't know or what we cannot do is, why the slide is moving?
It's on play.
It's on play? How can I stop it? Because it's on a play?
Yeah, you need to.
Are you using PowerPoint or Keynote?
Maybe pause the film.
How should I?
Are you using PowerPoint or Keynote?
PowerPoint.
So when you set up your slideshow,
Yeah.
we have to turn off your slides. So slideshow. Use timings. We can turn that off for a moment.
Okay. Yeah.
And now restart, and it should stop using your timing slides, and you'll have to manually change each slide.
That way. So it will stop.
Yeah, since we just deselected timings,
Oh.
it should stop that behavior.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so very much. Right. This helped me not. Thank you. Yeah, I learned something this morning, right? So why I came here. Right? Thank you, John, for inviting me. So, in search for equity and dignity in the workplace, because the two are not sometimes well understood, and why there is a disconnection between the way we are asking for more right, and at the same time we have the perception, the belief that the law is not protecting us. So there is a disconnection between what is and what we believe should be. And this is why maybe perhaps we must understand the very idea of right in the first place. As you know, the whole debate related to human rights is always emotional. It's always sometimes conflictual, and always misunderstood. And then, in order to understand each other this morning and open door for clear, I'm comfortable dealing with conflict and questions. I believe that there is a universal consciousness related to who we are human, and how we protect ourselves. And perhaps our human aspiration, you and I, every day, we have the same fundamental human aspiration, which means fairness, justice, equity, dignity. These are the expression of who we are, a human being, whether it's at home, in the plane, traveling, or right here during a nice Saturday morning meeting. So it's clearly related to that. So debating or questioning human rights will bring us to understand these concepts: justice, fairness, equity, dignity, and how these topics can come into play within a very clear-cut place of where we work every day. And then my point is that the disconnection between the ideal of right on the one hand and our emotional quest for justice on the other hand is tied to sometimes a human rights crisis. We are living in an era of a crisis related to the way we understand human rights. But this crisis, I will not go, I can come back if you have any question. But I believe the fundamental point of crisis is related to what I call an arrogant universalism versus a sectarian relative. On the one hand, we believe that human rights should be universal. And what is good for us here in Toronto and Canada as Canadians, it should be good for everyone else. What is good for the Western society should be good for everyone else. And instead of focusing on the efficiency of these rights, we tend to give lessons, to teach others, to tell them what to do. And we do not focus on what we do at home. So this is what I call an arrogant universalism, and it clashes with other people also everywhere and elsewhere. So the very idea of dignity and equity is tied to diversity. But diversity means also diversity in thought, diversity in accent, diversity in background, and everywhere. So we tend to believe diversity has to be what we think it is. And this is why it becomes a point of contention. And in fact, quite frankly, if you wake up in the morning, you look at if your children, you see your children praying over there, you will see that we are all human, right? In the sense that there is a clear problematic view of understanding right because of the fact that we are losing what makes us human, being an animal of social, which means our social bond is what makes us human, and the relation is absolutely important in the way that it will allow us to see ourselves in the other. So in that sense, my point is the disconnection between right and law come to the fact that after the 18th century, what happened is that the philosophy and the Western philosophy, we disconnected law from morality. And this is why today we are living in an era of misunderstanding and the era of crisis and tension. And this is absolutely important to keep in mind when I will be talking about the right. But maybe there is another point here. I think that if you double check the literature, right, human rights, and all these issues, labor issue, and wage issue, and tax issue, it comes down to the belief that there is a contested way of Western value. There is a misperception that our idea of right is tied to a Western construction of the society. And this seemingly brings me to the fact that there is over there, out there, at the universal level, a kind of democratic disillusion. And I believe, and this is my provocative answer to my colleague this morning, instead of thinking that we will have a revolution of the workers, this is what we have been taught, that if your right in the workplace is limited, if the law doesn't protect you, then we're going to come together as union, as workers, to make revolution, to bring the employer to change, to give us more weight. What happened since the 18th century, and precisely after the acceleration of the neoliberalism, what my colleague just mentioned, in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, the acceleration of neoliberalism make that, in fact, it's not the workers that coming together to change the dynamic. It's now the bourgeois using the statecraft in order to reduce our rights. So it is the belief that, in fact, constantly the bourgeois, so those who have the capital, right, the rich are becoming more rich, and the workers, you and I, were becoming poor. Why? Because of the revolution of the bourgeois. They will use the statecraft, and what is important is they will use the language of law, the language and the structure of law to reduce our weight and our right. And this revolution of the bourgeois is not only happening here, it's happening everywhere. So in order to understand the structure of Canadian economy, the debate between the government and the debate between unions and employers, one must take into consideration the structure of the global economy itself. We are witnessing somehow a crisis of institutions. today. Whether you are from a unionized situation or not, whether you are working, having a nice wage or not, a nice employment contract that protects you or not, we are witnessing a kind of crisis tied to institution. And the question I used to ask my students, do you believe that we as a citizen, we are governing ourselves? And this simple question can give you the answer. There is a perception that everything we do has no implication to our need and the fact that we want to organize ourselves and our right. Everything our social and political participation has no legal implication. We fight a particular law, and then the government will go before the court, and then after 10 years, the law is still there. And this is why the perception is that the government is losing legitimacy, and the institutions are corrupt, and in fact, there is still a systemic discrimination, and a law becomes a vehicle of that. So this is why maybe if the crisis is related to efficiency, sometimes the crisis of identity, the two are interrelated. Why efficiency? The government used to say, I need this law and this process or these procedures because I want to be more efficient. But what we see is a lack of efficiency. Every day, we need somehow a public service. And then, less and less efficiency in public service. Right? We pay more taxes, we contribute everything we want, but in the end, we have the perception that we are getting nothing from the government, from the society. And this sense of efficiency has affected the crisis of identity. And what we believe is a perception that, of course, we have less and less public good, less and less public service because of the others, right? The fools, the migrants. They're letting in more people and they're coming and steal our work and our job. The data, right? The fact is that people are not coming, people are not moving. This is the fact. The fact is that the migrant and other people coming, they are not stealing our job. It is an argument from the government to make us believe that, in fact, if you elect me, I will pack all of them and then send them back. And all of a sudden, tomorrow you will have a nice working place. This is a false presentation of the issue. The crisis of identity has nothing to do with the movement of people. It's precisely related to the perception of the citizen that the law is no longer protecting them. This is the crisis of identity. And then, of course, there is the crisis of equity, of course, related to the fact that the Constitution said, the law said, no discrimination whatsoever based on gender, based on skin color, based on your origin. But we are still witnessing a highly unthinkable discrimination based on gender. Women are still less and less paid. Women, not only they get less paid, but sometimes they have to do twice the same job. Not only twice, but maybe triple. Right? One at home, right? One during traffic, and then another one workplace. So in the end, this crisis of equity is also affecting the dynamic of the law itself. And I believe, and I start by saying that this is a subjective approach. I believe that, in fact, all the policy of equity, diversity, and all these interesting policies that we are using now is missing the point, right? We said we have to make decolonization, equity, diversity, and inclusion. But look at our workforces. Less and less inclusion. Less and less places, for example, disability, for example. We still have problems, including people with certain level of disability. So clearly, what the law says is one thing. The reality is absolutely another thing. In order to understand that, maybe it's a time to understand the very idea of right. So I will make an oversimplification, and I'm happy to come back on that because people tend to believe that the lawyers, they like suit. Of course we like suit. And then at the same time, they do not, the wage, right, they get paid, highly paid. It's a misperception of the reality. It's not the lawyers, at least not me, in that sense. But we have to understand the very meaning of right in the first place. I'm pretty much sure if I ask you, what do you mean by right? I will have more than 40 different definitions of right. But the phenomenology, the concept itself, has a historical root. And it's always, whether you are philosopher, sociology, anthropology, it's come down to individual entitlement, the very essence of right. My right is an obligation of the state. And then the law within that, the law is in fact the vehicle of right. If you can open the law, inside the law you have the right. So most of the time, the problem is that the vehicle of right may be problematic. If your car is a poor car, then you want to reach Ottawa. You're going to get lost sometime, maybe crash. So the law is highly problematic, whereas the right, it's either privilege or claim or power. These two has to be not to be mixed. Right? Most of the time people confuse them. The two are absolutely separate. And in fact, the issue of labor law, you see the two concepts, labor and law. My colleague just talked about labor. I add law. The two will be put together in order to understand the whole structure of our workforce today. The whole structure. Because in order to have law, there is a particular clear-cut way of making laws. We call it in law, the law-making process. The way we create new laws in order to reshape our society. The way we put together. So in fact, we believe that if I elect my MP, I will make new laws and then provide you with more rights. And then once I'm in office, they come to realize that there is a legal process in place that they have to follow. So you wait 1 year, 2 years, after 5 years, nothing happened. And you ask yourself, why there is no change? Because the poor guy elected in Ottawa has no power to, or at least some power, to make meaningful change. So the fundamental issue of labor law is the fact that it's within a legal order itself, a legal system as a whole that navigate between the interest of the government and also the interest of the corporation. So you cannot imagine today, remember what I said, the revolution of the bourgeois, the rich are still rich. Why? Because they are using the language of law within a legal structure in the way that regardless of your strike, you end up receiving a legislation to go back to work. So there is a kind of conflict here between the individual interests of workers and the interests of the corporation. In the meantime, the government is no longer protecting us as a citizen and as a workers, but the government is perceived as protecting the right of the corporation. And because of the fact that law sometimes is a product of politics, which means it has a link to the elite. And as far as we do not understand that, then we continue believing that we can just strike and get everything. It's no longer that way. We must change the way we work together and the way we see the future. If not, we're going to end up having the feeling that the more we work, the more things are changing. In fact, nothing is changing. So in that sense, I believe perhaps if we move from the right, we may also understand the whole concept of dignity. The two are interrelated. We have to understand the foundation of right, where this comes from, and the link to law, and also to understand the whole issue of human dignity. And all of this time, if you open the news, we all talk about human dignity. When we talk about human rights. And the question again is, what do we mean by dignity in the first place in relation to law? In fact, if you read the legal instrument, these are the legal instruments, it says that everyone, we have a certain level of equal right because of the simple fact that we are all human. And this simple word has an implication in a way that we organize ourselves, and particularly in the way that labor law is structured. It's derived from our inherent dignity of all human persons. But we didn't mention what Canadian law says. This is international instrument. If you come to Canadian law that derive from international law, you will see the seemingly difference here. In our Constitution, it says that all Canadian, all human person in Canada has this particular dignity. And in order to understand that, you must read, for example, Section 15 of the Constitution. I hope you read it. And in relation to Section 1, imagine that the government decide to reduce our bargaining power. Or we decide to go on strike and the government legislate back to work legislation. Is it legal or not? In order to have a restriction to our union right or our right as a worker, the government has to identify a particular section with the Constitution, which means Section 1. And also based on Section 15. These norms come together to give us the essence of dignity. And sometimes, most of the time, it's contested. I give you one interesting case here. This is one of the case that I like the most because it make you reflect on your own belief, your own understanding. This is a case that went up to the Supreme Court, right? Because the government decide, as you know, we still have issue with our indigenous people. And imagine the whole debate related to human dignity and equality. Even today, the First Nation kids, they have, most of them, some of them do not have access to basic drinking water. Even today. And then there is a huge historical injustice surrounding the treatment of our fellow indigenous people. And the government decided to introduce a bill that allow the First Nation group to fish, right, before the deadline. Right? They allow them to have their own 24 hours. You can go with your boat and then make your fishing, and then after that, after 24 hours, other people can do that. And Mr. Cape is not an indigenous guy. He believed that this law, this policy, violate his Section 5 right based on race. Why should the government allow the indigenous people to fish 24 hours before allowing me as a white guy to fish after 24 hours? This is against the equal right protected under Section 15. So the question, is he right to raise the issue of discrimination based on race? And if I ask you, maybe you will say yes or no, or maybe we don't know. Here is the point. A white male like me, right, decide to go to court against a group of indigenous people because of the fact that the government allowed them to fish 24 hours before me. Is it legal to do that? If I ask you. Even if you didn't read the case, you can just, is it legal that the government made a kind of affirmative action based on the fact that some people are indigenous? Is it right or no?
Yes.
No. He says right, yes. Everybody say yes? No, there is no bad, good answer. we have nice coffee, nice meal, nice mood. So please, if you say no, just say no. Do you think it's right that a affirmative action policy allows a group of people, Canadians, having advantage against other group? Is it right? So you see the problem here. It depends. We are not comfortable in dealing with this issue. I want to say yes, based on the fact that talking about indigenous or black, it seems not that simple, emotional. But the law says the government can do that. And before, in front of the Supreme Court has to jump in. The case went up to the court. And the court has to come back to section 15 and then section 1 and say, you know what? Because of historical injustice, section 15.1, I didn't mention section 15.2. Section 15.2 allowed the government to make laws that correct historical injustice. Because of the fact that section 15 is the foundation of equity and equality. We cannot talk about equality without putting into our laws the whole idea of dignity. So you see here the problem of dealing with the link between right and law. And the most interesting aspect is what I just said. So two things. Number one is the highly contested idea of right. Number two is the highly contested idea of human right. Number three is the fact that the law is sometimes a vehicle of certain injustice. These are the three things I just mentioned. And let me open another topic, because the two are interrelated, and you will see how scary things are becoming. You and I, as the workers, we are in this is a difficult time for us because of history today and maybe because of tomorrow. There is a fundamental transformation. The nature of our work, the way we teach as a professor, it's gone. The way I study, my PhD and all my staff, it's gone. I can no longer teach like I used to teach. The young generation, the new student, what I have this year, what they're asking me to do has nothing to do with the previous year. Because absolute change in the way we teach, absolutely change in the way we work. And this is precisely the fact that we are entering into what I call the digital age. And this shift in social structure and the shift in the way we see each other and the way we organize ourselves has a direct implication on our workplace. And can we imagine if I say that there is a shrinking labor force today? You may disagree with me or not. There is total shrinking labor force. And the question, why I said shrinking labor force, and at the same time, we are having a high level of unemployment. Right? There is sometimes a kind of disconnection. The fact is that there is clearly an indication of a huge shrinking labor force. Why? Maybe two reasons. Number one is, as you and I, you know, Canadian, I'm talking about Canadian, maybe Switzerland, maybe North Africa, but we have put these two countries together. We are no longer making babies. Number one, right? We are no longer making enough babies. Why? I will not answer that question. Maybe we couldn't find the right person to do that. But the reality is less and less kids. And then the two is that we are living longer. So how can we match these two? There is a dialectical tension between the social reality and the future of our society, which culminates to the shrinking labor force. So we may end up. There is no guarantee in this room, I will tell you frankly, that we're going to get our full pension. We don't know if we don't get people to come to work. So this is related to the impact, the fantastic contribution of technology. Of course, we can have a debate whether technology will change everything, but one thing is sure to me, that technology is affecting not only the legal structure, but also affecting the structure of the economy. And this is why maybe we must reconsider our whole and crucial dogmas related to empathic civilization. We came from the 18th, 19th century that we human, we are living in an empathic civilization. We love each other, we are nice to each other, but things is changing. And the transformation is not only rapid, it's brutal. And all of a sudden, we wake up in the morning and there's no way back to the way we used to work. Things will change. And it affects our demography, it affects the way we organize ourselves as a city, it affects our teaching, university, academy, it affects everything. At the simple personal level, it shapes our values. It contributes to shaping our attitude toward others. It affects our behavior. This is at the personal level, at micro level. The change, the shift of technology is doing that. But at the bigger level, the state level, we are seeing the fact that it affects our social institutions. We are less and less comfortable with the government, less and less comfortable with the military, less and less comfortable with maybe politics. People are losing faith in politics because of that. And what is interesting, or not only interesting, but maybe problematic, is not only the automation, but the fact that perhaps what is happening at our simple personal level will affect the way we can replace human being. So in terms of law, this is not only an abstract, right, ideological, or quite frankly, young lawyers thinking out of the boxes. This is highly problematic in terms of legal process. It's highly problematic in terms of legal structure. And clearly, it's highly problematic in the way we deal with court and the ruling of the court. Because if our working power or our labor can be replaced by machine, what are we gonna do as a human? If I ask you, and quite frankly, I'm not seeing any way that it will not change. Yesterday, the day before yesterday, Thursday, Professor Ouedraogo, I want to talk to you, I need you advice, I want to go to law school. And I asked, hey, when are you going to go to law school? I want to become a lawyer. And do you know that in the near future, maybe in 5 years, 10 years, we no longer need a lawyer. We no longer need anyone specialized in law. Because the very industry of law will be gone. You want to get divorced because wrong guy or wrong lady, then you put all the information on the machine and then you print the decision. Right? Split asset, please mortgage, please everything, and then the kids and the machine will do everything. You no longer need to pay the high price to get divorced. It's done. You're gonna get surgery, you no longer need to wait 6 months, right? You can walk into the machine, I have pain here, and then 5 minutes after, the machine will do everything, and then you take your car and go back home. So it's clearly, there is the data showing that there is extraordinary revolution in the making. And we still do not understand the full scale of this extraordinary change. What I'm saying from a legal standpoint, of course, we must also change entirely the way law is formulated, the way law is organized. the legal sphere will also change. This brings us to some level of ethical dilemma. The question we are divided, right? Ourselves, we are having constant conversation with ourselves. An ethical dilemma. What should we do? What should we do? So, if the machine will replace us, somehow replace some workforce, maybe people will say maybe we're going to create new one. Of course, we can still believe that we're going to create new one, replace the old labor with new one. But think 1 minute, 1 second, that most of the job that we know will be affected. Most of our legal beings, the legal structure, the legal processes will get affected. So you will see, you can witness that right now. If you go back to your workplace, you will see the high level. Do we still have privacy today? Gone. I don't understand. Sometimes people take your Facebook account, and so they have to hide to put the PIN number. It's gone. Right? It gives you a false impression that you are responsible of your own way. They have everything on you. They know us better than ourselves. So privacy is gone. Are we living in a high level of surveillance at the workplace? The employer is doing everything possible. We are under surveillance. Extraordinary, constant, integrated, organized way of surveilling workers. They know what you do every day. As soon as you open your Facebook account, they have connection. As soon as you use the employment IT system, they will do that. So this is gone. Do we have protection? So the law says, you and I as workers, we have protection under the law. Our privacy must be protected. Of course, what thing is the law? The other thing is the reality. So these are things that is related to the extraordinary evolution of technology. And this revolution is also affecting, quite frankly, our legal system and our legal processes. My point here now is, of course, a kind of a human way of seeing the economy. What I'm saying is somehow depressing. But I will open a new era of more positive things. As a human, we are able of fantastic things. We can do good, but at the same time, we are good of doing bad. But I think that we must look at the humanizing process in terms of the structure of our economy. Think of this one. We have 3 elements here that integrate themselves in a way that it produces the norm, the structure of the society, the individual, you and I, what we do, our regular daily based choices affect the state. And then, of course, the behavior of the state, the way the state put together laws and legal institutions and processes affect the market. And in fact, what is happening is we are less and less as a human making the right choice, and the government is making the bad one that allow the market to run everything in the end. So we complain about the market, but in fact, at the individual level, we are not doing enough to change that. And what is interesting is we decide to listen to the government. Remember, I said lack of legitimacy. So the government is no longer listening to us. The government is listening to the market and the external forces. So the globalizing process that comes, the big monster, is no longer a promised land. Right? My colleague just mentioned Reagan and Thatcher. These are the architects of contemporary neoliberals because they believe in the market. But their decision as a statecraft has affected the entire global economic system. What happened is globalization of the economy is not doing what they're supposed to do. Even at the individual level, what we can do as parents, as adults, I'm not seeing that from our student standpoint. What your dollar can do 10 years ago can no longer do the same today. So in the global north, our nice country, we are witnessing the gap between the rich and the poor. It's widening. What our money, our salary, if you compare with the inflation, in fact, it went down. Whereas the rich, it's extraordinarily getting more. And precisely after the 2008 crisis and after the COVID crisis, we all believe that things are going to change. After COVID, in fact, we became more poor and the rich get more. Number one. Number two, think 1 second. The global south, African nations, South Asia, Latin America, these are poor, what we call the developing nations. The promise of globalization has entirely destroyed their social structure, creating a widening gap between the developed nation and the rich one. So it's insane if you go to Congo, for example, or you go to Sri Lanka. You will see the extraordinary gap between us, we as Canadians, and them. Our economy, the corporation, the multinational, they went there, mining companies, they promised them interesting tomorrow. And what happened in the Congo? Rich, wealthy nation, in terms of natural resources, they're getting more and more poor. And the state is no longer efficient. So the structure of the economy is doing that. And what we do at the national level, we do exactly the same at the international level. Because international law is also used to make sure that these corporations, they can jump from one place to the next, not paying taxes, and then pushing the benefit at a level unprecedented. And then, of course, at the national level, you will see the conflict just artificially created, right? The corporation, they willfully create that, what? The distinction between the high skill and the low skill level. If you compare the young generation today versus the generation of the 50s, you will see our kids are highly trained. They have high education, postgraduate education, unprecedented. And the bachelor degree is no longer given them in a meaningful way. They have to do sometimes one degree, and then the next one, and then a master, and even if we ask them to do a PhD, they finish the PhD and still no job. And the problem is, clearly, the structure of the economy that is used by the corporation to make our government itself make laws and organize our society in the way that your skill is no longer valued, right? And then the question I ask, why inequality increase? Because we believe that if we do all these things, we make all these change, we're gonna narrow down inequality. But no, number one is the market. Clearly, we want people to get trained, high-skilled laborers. But in the end, what we propose them as a wage is nothing. So the kid went to school, bachelor, master, PhD, high level of debt, and then no clear-cut, interesting way to pay off the debt. And then he got stuck, or she got stuck, with the market. And number two is at the institutional level. Look at ourselves, or your own workplace. You will see from 2015 to now, we are witnessing a less and less unionization, the decline of our unions. The fundamental issue is if you and I, as an individual, we do not do nothing, or we do not do enough, we're going to get into trouble. The way we are organizing ourselves and the way we behave is going to affect clearly the power of our kids and our grandkids. Because of the fact that the trend is declining, and I'm not seeing any way that it's going to change unless we decide so as a citizen. And I will come back in that in a moment. So maybe, and this is the point here, the very idea of human condition. Because if we are, as a union workers, we are less and less protection. Remember what I said. The law is no longer protecting us because the law is an instrument of the elite from the government. Number 3 is the fact that our union, they have less and less power to bargain in a way that will bring us more protection. Perhaps it's gonna affect our condition clearly to me. And maybe the whole point that we talked about this morning from Carlo to myself, maybe there is some interesting point that we have to focus on. Maybe the entire system is no longer relevant. Perhaps you have to go to school and then get your degree, get to work, earn money, pay your mortgage, etc. Maybe this system entirely is becoming less and less relevant. So maybe we need to move away from the traditional classical accumulation based on the economy to a new way of living together. Maybe perhaps the future is no longer using the legal structure to organize the workplace. Maybe the individual are shifting from that to the new total economic system based on sharing. That will focus perhaps on the very basic idea of human aspiration. What do we need as a human being? The whole concept, the philosophical concept of need. Maybe the critiques of law is relevant on the one hand. Perhaps the critiques of the economic system is also good. I think, this is my narrow view, I think that something is happening. Something is happening not only in Canada, but everywhere. I traveled 2 months ago, right, to West Africa. I did some interesting thing with the UN. And then they asked me to double check what is going on in Central Africa because of human rights abuses, and also West Africa. They need me to propose a kind of strategic or a new strategy in order to deal with all these human rights abuses. And then I interview people, government, politics, NGOs, civil societies, and what the people are saying in Central Africa or in Western Africa. It's exactly the same thing like what my students are talking about in classroom. They believe that the issue of accumulation is gone. They believe that all these issues of right and equity is related to the fact that we are talking about something that is gone. And we are no longer able to create the new thing that is in the making. The economy of sharing. The fact that my need, do I need 3 cars? Well, maybe perhaps as a lawyer, but maybe not, all right? Do I need the huge car or 3 houses? Maybe or maybe not. So these are questions we must ask ourselves in one way or another. But the answer, the way we're going to answer this question will affect the future of our kids, the future generation. The decision we will be making today will have clearly an implication to the idea of res publica, the state, as Canadian. And I believe that if you look back, way back in the long historical trajectory, you will see that as a whole, I believe, maybe I'm wrong or naive, but I believe that we have made, actually, a clear, considerable moral progress. So my point here is that maybe perhaps the future will not be as dark as we tend to believe. Maybe perhaps if we shift from accumulation to sharing, maybe the future will be better than today in terms of human aspiration, in terms of human happiness. We have made considerable progress. I can give you only a few examples. Number one, if I was born in 1994, not that back, in South Africa, I won't be able to have this nice conversation with you because the social structure says apartheid. We have to put, if you are black, you're supposed to be stupid, and then you cannot work with others. 1994 is not that far. What happened? It's gone. So if you go back deep again, my ancestors, they used to be chained from remote country Africa to North America as slaves. It's gone. In fact, maybe perhaps our critiques today is based on the state of our moral progress. We have made considerable progress, and we compare ourselves not with yesterday, but with tomorrow. And this is why we are still absolutely in miserable condition. Our condition is miserable for the fact that we are not comparing ourselves with yesterday, but with tomorrow. And with the complaint, the self-reproach, everything we do, the bad stuff we do, because we compare ourselves with tomorrow. And I believe, and this is my view, I believe that tomorrow will be better. For the fact that as humans, we have no choice. In fact, the corporation can do whatever they want. The government still can help them with laws. But in the end, as citizens, we're going to come down to understand the basic fact that we are all Canadian. In a way that we all need the same thing. We all want the same exact thing for ourselves and for our children. And perhaps it is clearly that even the complexity of laws, as I mentioned, oversimplification, but the issue related to rule of law, the fundamental question related to the way we organize ourselves, I do believe, and this is my strong, fundamental academic research, my books, my articles, I constantly go back to history and explain the fact that, of course, everything that is happening, wars, conflicts, crises, these are part of who we are as humans. And in fact, the trajectory of our human aspiration, the fact that we are moving toward our own perfection, it will never be broken off. We like it or not. It's going to be continuously going forward into a particular perfection. And the law as a means to an end. I remember 2 days ago, a conference with colleagues in Switzerland. I explained the fact that law has to be a means to an end. It has to be a vehicle of social justice. This is the foundation of law. If we miss that, then we are getting into trouble. Because, of course, if law is a vehicle of right, it can be used for good, it can be also used for bad. But let me make a choice, a rational choice as Canadians to make good laws, just laws for just society. We can do that. We can just decide as a Canadian to raise the minimum wage, to make sure our kids will no longer get into debt. We can decide as other nations. I did my own education, my postgraduate education in Switzerland. I didn't pay nothing. My colleague from Harvard, because the program is a joint program with Harvard Law School. And then 6 colleagues coming from US, they told I have to borrow money from the bank to pay my school. I was laughing. Are you crazy? I'm paying nothing. Because the Switzerland, the people of Switzerland, they decide that education is a public good. You can pay tiny portion to help run the academia. But it is a choice. As a society, we can make that choice. But if you decide that education is a commodity, it has to be run by the market, then we get in trouble. So I believe fundamentally that law as a means to an end, we can use the legal structure to bring about more just society. This is why, fundamentally, I still believe that we must take right seriously. Thank you for listening to me, and I'm here to answer your questions.
Thank you very much, Professor Ouedraogo. Does anybody have any questions for the professor?
Can you explain a little bit more? Because I wasn't sure when you were talking about the DDI as a policy of expression of a cosmopolitan society.
And then sometimes you ask yourself, what is the meaning of that? What do we mean by equity? What do we mean by diversity? And what do we mean by inclusion? So in fact, the government is using that as a simple political discourse. For me, it's part of the very foundation of law and rights. If you go back to history, you will see no society without diversity. The very idea of state is bringing people, diverse people together to govern themselves. The state is, the birth of the state is out of war and diversity. So I'm surprised that now we're talking about inclusion. This is absolutely the basic structure of any rule and any law. It has to be inclusive. It has to be universal. It has to be impartial. So all of a sudden, we seem to discover that our society is not enough diverse. And we need to put more diversity. Sometime 2 years ago, 1 year ago, I was fortunate with Diana. We were fortunate to be granted to hire new colleagues, new prof. So I really put the document together. We send it out. We need one prof with this specialization. We need PhD, etc. All these criteria. Number one, I was surprised. One position, 75 people applied. 75 for one position. The second one, roughly 56 or 57. All PhDs with extraordinary research background, with fundamental expertise in teaching, in research. 75. Out of them, we have to choose one. So we're gonna lay down the whole process, equity, diversity, inclusion. We have to focus on the body of the department, how many black women have, how many women, how many, etc., etc. And then all these criteria, it has to be decided for a committee. So a group of bank of people, me included, we're gonna sit down, review all your file, and decide your background is substantially equal to the next one. The question I asked my colleagues, how we come to this conclusion? It's always highly subjective. Highly subjective. So the EDI process gives us the impression that equity, diversity, inclusion is the key. If we disconnect right to morality, then we are missing the point. We must have a just society. My criteria is justice. Justice is fairness. Justice has nothing to do with your color, your gender, your accent, your background. Justice has to do with who we are as a human. In fact, my point is the law has to protect the humanity in every human being. The humanity within every human being. And if you don't do that, we are navigating between what we want and what we actually do on a daily basis.
And so right now I'm struggling with the idea of Canada being this great and diverse country, for good and for bad, right? I fully admit I'm conflicted, right? We got some great things, but man, we gave South Africa apartheid. We literally, our residential school system is the pathway, the map that we gave to South Africa for apartheid to keep people divided. And so let me introduce conflict, because I'm human, right? We also gave the Charter of Rights, right? So we know the difference between right and wrong. We are a conflicted country through and through with all kinds of discrepancies, we're polarized within our own identity, right? And so right now, looking at the DEI is something that I agree we shouldn't necessarily have to. But the reality is that we have systemic racism. It's built in, it's ingrained, we've passed it on for centuries. And until we can reconcile how every one of our Canadian citizens are living and accessing and benefiting from the laws of Canada, there does sometimes need to be a conscientious decision to say who among these applicants has been disadvantaged by our inherent bias that we can't always tell, right? And so sometimes having that reminder on a piece of paper is a justifiable good, like you were saying, to sort of correct those historical wrongs, because what we haven't done is correct all the inequities that are built into how much money do Indigenous nations get for their education. They do it based on the taxes that are collected in certain areas, and then they fail to, thrive, right? Whereas we have other schools who have lots of taxes and they get those benefits. You also mentioned about, I wrote it down because I was going to ask you a question. So I'm struggling. Love to have a conversation with you, Professor. But I wanted to know, when you were talking about the revolution of the bourgeoisie, is that vehicle, so the vehicle being law, is that the lobbyists who can play both roles, right? Advocate and adversary, is that them? Is that who we're talking about in terms of, the revolution of the bourgeois, right? They pick up a cause, right or wrong, but if it advantages them, then let's throw some money behind it and let's get this revolution, which is just another word for change. And change doesn't necessarily mean that we all benefit. It's change that me, who hired the lobbyists, went, hey, I got some money. I'd like to have some change and a little bit more cha-ching change.
Right? The working class, they will kick out the ruling class, and then they will establish a more just working environment. This is what we learn in school. All of a sudden, nothing happened. And then you look at everywhere, not only in the Western country, everywhere the ruling class, the government, those coming into office, they are not coming from the working sphere. Can you imagine that someone will get elected as U.S. president without having the stamp from the bank, from the big bank, from the big insurance company, from the big money? Imagine the level of money they are raising in order to run for office. Ask ourselves, why should I get money from this billionaire in order to explain to my society that if you put me in office, everything will be fine? So the struggle here is, I didn't want to come back to neoliberalism. In fact, the idea of neoliberalism is, number one, we have liberalism, the classical one, the economic liberalism, the classical one, and the political liberalism, which means the two are separate. Politics deals with the society, the good of the society, the social justice, the structure of citizens, or the public service. And economy produces revenue. And the state will raise taxes in order to finance the social services. What happened is the two connected. Those holding the economy, they are now getting the political power. And the public policy out of that will not be a policy pro-union, pro-workers. They will put in place policies that benefit the rich. So this is the point. My argument is, until we understand that, we get in trouble. And nothing will change, because every public policy in place based on laws, it will be always for the benefits of the rich. And the data tell us this evidence. Your second question is the EDI. I agree with you. There is historical injustice, of course. And the Section 15(1) and 2, Section 15(2) allow the government to put in place policies that correct this historical injustice. Are we doing enough? I have a doubt. But the point is, if you go back to history, you will see, yes, we had bad relationship with the First Nation. We had a residential school. This was absolutely crazy. But the good news is it's ended. This is a starting point. Why it's ended, I don't know. But one thing is we come to realize that this is profoundly unjust. And we ended that. What happened? Because this relation has built within law. This is why I'm the critic of law. Unless we change that, these laws themselves derive from uncrusted dogmas. Individual uncrusted dogmas that block us in making meaningful change. Unless we overcome that, individually speaking, we must, as an individual, ask ourselves this question. What is my share here? What is my contribution to making Canadian society a better place? So at this point, there is a disconnection between what we expect from the government, they are not doing enough, and what we actually do as an individual. So the conflicting aspect that you mentioned is correct. Our own beliefs and our own ethoses and the reality of the society. But the point here is we are moving slowly but surely toward a better place.
Can you leave me on this is so depressing now. So I'm going to just flip it one more down. It's okay. It's better projection. Completely depressing, sorry. But tell us one thing that unions can do to collectively make this better, right? So we are a series of individuals within a series of locals and unions, and we're all trying to do our part, right? We're on a micro level, we're all trying to make that workplace a better place. One lesson that I got from both you and Professor Carl is concede not. But can you give us one thing that unions should be looking forward to doing more of together to make that next leap, right? Sometimes there's small steps, but what's that next leap that we should be looking forward to?
I will absolutely disappoint you right now. I believe that our union will remain what our individually we want them to be. The union will become.
Very philosophical.
Because the point here, you call as a union, you call for a meeting, a general membership meeting. How many people show up? Few people show up. You do everything. Sometimes you ask yourself, why I'm doing that? I'm also a worker, right? I need to earn my money. I want to come together and then build a strong bargaining position. You call membership meeting, people are not coming. Please contribute to this. They are not doing nothing because people are focused on their own selfish, narrow view that if I go to work, I will earn my money and pay my tax. I cannot afford to lose my way. So what we are not losing today, we are losing that tomorrow. So the union will remain at a poor level because of the action of the membership. They will remain what we want them to become. Do we want a strong union? Let's get involved on a daily basis. Can you imagine? I do not understand that. There is no employer if we do not work. There is no money to make if we decide not to work. Everything we are doing, we are talking about, is come down to ourselves. We want to work more right for more wage, we can do that. It's up to us. Our grandparents, they did the same. After the Second World War, they fought to have a democratic, unionized society. And we are not doing enough. Because we are so scared, so busy with our daily life that we tend to forget. If we don't come together, the employer will take our right every time. We're back, one by one. With the help of the state, they will take back all our protected rights. And I tell you as a lawyer, I know what the good government is doing within the system. The law will be used to take every day our unionized rights if we don't do nothing. So it's time for us as workers to get involved and ask for a fair, clear cutting. In fact, we are not asking for charity. Absolutely not. The inflation, what we are getting paid is nothing. It's absolutely nothing compared to the profit they are doing. And we believe that, no, if we ask more, cut your rate, cut your benefits, this is the new normal. No, we can change everything if we get involved and if we participate to our unionized activity. If not, we're going to have our eyes to cry every day.
Thank you very much, Professor Ouedraogo. On behalf of the CCU, we'd like to thank you for attending this morning.
Thank you.
You're welcome to join us for lunch, please. And this is a little token of our appreciation.
You don't need to do that.
Yes, we do.
Thank
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.